Sometimes the most ordinary people do the most extraordinary things. When you're a single father, working 2 jobs just to keep the lights on, heroism isn't something you plan for. Lucas Martinez was driving home from his night shift when he saw a car flip on the rain-soaked highway. He didn't think twice about stopping. Inside the wreckage, a woman was trapped and bleeding. Lucas pulled her to safety just before the car caught fire. But in saving her life, he lost his leg. Now, struggling more than ever, Lucas thought his act of kindness was forgotten. Then the woman he saved showed up at his door with something that would change everything. She didn't just thank him. She gave him the keys to her car and promised to help rebuild his life. But why would a stranger go to such lengths for him? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The alarm clock's shrill cry pierced through the thin walls of apartment 2B at exactly 5:30 a.m., just as it had every morning for the past 3 years. Lucas Martinez rolled over with a groan, his calloused hand slapping the snooze button with practiced precision. The weathered work badge hanging from his nightstand caught the dim morning light. Martinez. L. Warehouse Associate, Employee, 4721. It was more than just identification, it was proof of his dedication, his promise to Sophia that they'd make it work, no matter what. "Daddy, you awake?" came a sleepy voice from the doorway. 8-year-old Sophia stood there in her favorite pajamas, the ones with the faded unicorns that had survived countless wash cycles. Her dark hair was a mess of tangles, but her brown eyes, so much like her mother's, though Lucas tried not to think about that, sparkled with the kind of morning energy that only children possess. "I'm awake, Mija," Lucas said, sitting up and opening his arms. Sophia padded across the small room and climbed onto the bed, settling against his chest, like she'd done since she was tiny. These morning moments were sacred to him, the quiet before their day began in earnest. Their apartment wasn't much to look at: 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen barely big enough for 2 people to stand in. The carpet was worn thin in places, and the heater had a tendency to rattle like an old train, but it was theirs. Every month, Lucas made sure that rent check was the first thing he wrote, even if it meant eating ramen for dinner more often than he'd like. "What's for breakfast, Papa?" Sophia asked, using the nickname she'd given him when she was learning to talk. It had stuck, even as her vocabulary expanded far beyond her years. "How about pancakes?" Lucas suggested, knowing full well they were out of pancake mix. "Or maybe some of that fancy cereal?" Sophia giggled. "We don't have fancy cereal. We have the bag kind from the discount store." "Right, the bag kind. Even better, it's like a treasure hunt, finding all the different shapes." This was their dance, the gentle teasing that made even the leanest mornings feel abundant. Lucas had learned early in their journey as a family of 2 that laughter was free, and joy didn't require money. Sophia had never known the luxury of name-brand cereals or organic this and that, but she'd also never doubted for a second that she was loved completely. Lucas worked 2 jobs to keep their small world turning. Days belonged to Henderson Logistics, where he loaded and unloaded trucks in the massive warehouse on the outskirts of town. His supervisor, Rick, was a decent man who understood that single fathers didn't have the luxury of calling in sick or showing up late. Lucas's work badge had earned its wear from being clipped and unclipped countless times, from shifts that started before dawn and ended when his back ached so much he could barely straighten up. Nights belonged to Secure All Services, where he sat in security booths, watching empty office buildings and parking lots. It wasn't glamorous work, but it paid an extra $8 an hour, and those $8 meant Sophia could have new school supplies or the occasional movie night with popcorn from the real movie theater instead of the discount store microwave kind. Sophia's mother, Carmen, had left when their daughter was 3. She'd said she wasn't ready for the responsibility, that she'd married too young, had a baby too soon. Lucas had begged her to stay, promised they could work it out, but Carmen had already made up her mind. One morning he'd woken up to find her closet empty and a note on the kitchen counter apologizing for not being strong enough. That was 5 years ago, and Lucas had stopped waiting for her to change her mind. "Daddy, Mrs. Peterson says I'm really good at reading," Sophia announced, pulling him back from memories he tried not to visit too often. She was getting dressed for school, struggling with the buttons on her cardigan. "Of course you are. You get that from your old man," Lucas said, helping her with the stubborn button. "What book are you reading now?" "Charlotte's Web. It's sad, but Charlotte is really smart. She saves Wilbur even though she's just a spider." Lucas paused in his button fastening. Sometimes Sophia said things that hit him right in the chest, observations that were too wise for someone who still believed in the tooth fairy. "Yeah, mija. Sometimes the smallest acts make the biggest difference." Their morning routine was choreographed by necessity. Lucas would make Sophia's lunch, usually a peanut butter sandwich, apple slices, and whatever snack was on sale that week, while she brushed her teeth. He'd walk her to the bus stop 3 blocks away, kiss her forehead, and remind her to be good for Mrs. Peterson. Then he'd drive his 15-year-old Honda to Henderson Logistics, work an 8-hour shift moving boxes and freight, come home just in time to help Sophia with homework, make dinner, and head out for his night security shift. The neighborhood around Maple Grove Apartments wasn't the worst in the city, but it wasn't the best either. The buildings had seen better decades, and most of the residents were working families like them, people who understood that community meant looking out for each other because no one else would. Mrs. Chen from 1A always made sure to cook extra rice and would mysteriously leave containers outside their door when Lucas was working late. Tommy Rodriguez from the ground floor had fixed Lucas's car more times than he could count, never accepting more than a beer in payment. Lucas had few close friends. His work schedule didn't leave much time for socializing. But the neighbors knew they could count on him too. He'd helped Mr. Williams move furniture, fixed Mrs. Patterson's leaky faucet, and taught the teenagers in 3C how to change a tire. It was the kind of community that forms when people understand struggle and choose to face it together. Evenings with Sophia were Lucas's reward for the long days. They'd sit at their small kitchen table, Sophia working on math problems, while Lucas paid bills or researched job opportunities that might offer better hours or benefits. She'd tell him about school, who was being mean to whom, what new book Mrs. Peterson had introduced, which lunch lady gave the biggest portions. Lucas listened to every word, filing away the details of her world so he could be the father she deserved, even when exhaustion made his eyes burn. "Papa, why do you work so much?" Sophia had asked him once, not in complaint but with genuine curiosity. "Because work means we can stay here together," Lucas had explained, "and someday maybe we'll have enough saved up for a house with a real yard where you can have a dog." "I don't need a dog," Sophia had said simply. "I just need you not to be so tired all the time." That conversation had stayed with him, a reminder that even at 8, Sophia was aware of the sacrifices they both made. She never complained about the second-hand clothes or the fact that other kids went to summer camps while she spent July and August at the community center's day program. She never asked why Mama left or why Daddy limped sometimes after particularly hard days at the warehouse. The refrigerator in their kitchen was covered with Sophia's artwork and school papers, math tests with gold stars, drawings of the two of them holding hands in front of houses that were much bigger than their apartment, stories she'd written about brave princesses and kind dragons. Lucas read every assignment, celebrated every good grade, and kept the best pieces in a special folder that he looked through on particularly difficult nights. Money was always tight, but Lucas had learned to stretch every dollar. He shopped sales, clipped coupons, and had discovered which stores marked down their bread and produce at specific times. Sophia's school clothes came from thrift stores and clearance racks, but Lucas made sure they were always clean and pressed. Pride, he'd learned, didn't require money, it required effort. On this particular morning, As Lucas got ready for what would turn out to be the most important day of their lives, everything seemed routine. Sophia ate her cereal and read the back of the box aloud, a habit that never failed to make him smile. He packed his lunch and checked that his work badge was securely clipped to his shirt pocket. The forecast called for rain later, so he made sure Sophia had her jacket. "Love you, Papa," she said as they stood at the bus stop, her small hand warm in his. "Love you too, Mija, more than all the stars." It was their saying, their promise, their anchor. As Sophia's bus pulled away and Lucas drove toward another day at Henderson Logistics, he had no idea that in 12 hours everything would change. He didn't know that on this rain-soaked evening he'd make a decision that would cost him his leg but save a stranger's life. He couldn't imagine that this stranger would become the answer to prayers he'd been too proud to voice. All he knew was that he had work to do, bills to pay, and a little girl counting on him to make it all work. The work badge pinned to his shirt was more than identification. It was a promise he'd made to Sophia and to himself. No matter how tired he got, no matter how much his back ached or his pride stung, he would provide for his daughter. That evening, driving home through the storm after 14 hours of work, Lucas Martinez was just a tired single father trying to get home safely. He had no idea he was about to become someone's hero, or that saving a stranger's life would somehow save his own. The rain started falling just as Lucas finished his security rounds at the Meridian office complex. Fat droplets splattered against the windshield of his Honda as he signed out at 11:47 p.m., marking the end of another 18-hour day. His body ached in places he'd forgotten existed, and the thought of Sophia's sleepy smile when he checked on her before crawling into bed was the only thing keeping him upright. Highway 9 stretched ahead of him like a black ribbon, slick with rain that caught his headlights and threw them back in fractured patterns. Lucas had driven this route hundreds of times, knew every curve and pothole, every place where the guardrail needed repair. Tonight felt different, though. The storm was getting worse, and the wind pushed against his car with increasing force. He rubbed his eyes, trying to fight off the exhaustion that seemed to seep into his bones these days. 14 hours at the warehouse, then straight to the security job without even stopping for dinner. The granola bar he'd eaten at 3 p.m. felt like a distant memory, but grocery money was tight this week, and Sophia needed new school shoes more than he needed a proper meal. The radio crackled with weather warnings, flash flood watch, dangerous driving conditions. Lucas considered pulling over to wait out the worst of it, but Sophia's babysitter charged by the hour, and every extra dollar mattered. Mrs. Rodriguez was good to them, only charging half her usual rate because she understood their situation. But Lucas never wanted to take advantage of her kindness. Lightning illuminated the sky just as Lucas crested the hill near Miller's Bend. In that brief, electric moment, he saw it a dark sedan about half a mile ahead, its taillights weaving erratically across the center line. The driver was going too fast for conditions, taking the curves like the road was dry instead of treacherous. "Slow down, friend," Lucas muttered, easing off his own accelerator and increasing the distance between their vehicles. He'd seen enough accidents on this stretch of highway to know that curves and rain made for deadly combinations. The sedan's brake lights flashed once, twice, then the car seemed to slide sideways. Lucas watched in horror as the vehicle lost control completely, spinning once before leaving the roadway. It rolled 3 times down the embankment, metal screaming against rocks and earth, before slamming into the guardrail with a sound that would haunt Lucas for the rest of his life. Without thinking, Lucas yanked his steering wheel to the right and hit his hazard lights. His Honda skidded on the wet pavement but held the road as he pulled onto the shoulder. Steam was already rising from the wreckage below, and Lucas could see the faint orange glow that meant the engine was getting dangerously hot. His hands shook as he grabbed his phone to call 911, but the call wouldn't connect. No signal. The storm must have knocked out the nearest cell tower. Lucas looked down at the overturned sedan, now clearly visible in his headlights, and made a decision that would change everything. He ran. The embankment was steeper than it looked from the road, and the rain-soaked earth gave way under his work boots more than once. Lucas half slid, half fell down the slope, his heart hammering against his ribs. As he got closer to the wreck, he could see movement inside. Someone was alive in there. The sedan had come to rest on its passenger side against the guardrail. The driver's side window was completely shattered, and Lucas could smell gasoline mixing with the acrid scent of burning oil. Smoke was beginning to curl up from under the crumpled hood. "Hello?" he called out, dropping to his knees beside the wreckage. "Can you hear me?" A weak voice answered from inside. "Help me, please." Lucas peered through the broken window and saw a woman, probably in her 30s, suspended by her seatbelt. Blood trickled from a cut on her forehead, and her left arm hung at an unnatural angle. But she was conscious, alert, and looking at him with eyes that held both hope and terror. "I'm going to get you out," Lucas said, trying to project more confidence than he felt. "What's your name?" "Emma," she whispered. "Emma Caldwell. I can't feel my legs." Lucas's stomach dropped, but he kept his voice steady. "Okay, Emma. I'm Lucas. I'm going to help you, but I need you to stay calm for me. Can you do that?" The smoke was getting thicker now, and Lucas could hear an ominous hissing sound from the engine compartment. They didn't have much time. He tried the driver's door, but it was completely crushed. The windshield was spider-webbed but intact. The only way in was through the passenger window, but Emma was pinned between her seat and the center console. "Emma, I need to move you, and it might hurt," Lucas said, squeezing through the window opening. Glass cut into his arms and shoulders, but he ignored the pain. "I'm going to unbuckle your seatbelt, okay? The car's on fire, isn't it?" Emma's voice was getting weaker. "We're going to be fine," Lucas lied, reaching for her seatbelt release. The mechanism was jammed, twisted by the impact. He pulled out his pocket knife, a cheap thing he'd bought at a gas station, and started sawing through the heavy fabric. The smoke was definitely coming from under the hood now, and Lucas could feel heat building inside the car. His hands were slick with rain and blood, making it hard to grip the knife properly. The seatbelt finally gave way just as the first small flame licked up from the engine compartment. "Okay, Emma, here we go," Lucas said, wrapping his arms around her torso. She cried out in pain as he lifted her, and he could feel her bones shift in ways they shouldn't, but there was no time to be gentle. The flames were spreading. Getting out of the car was harder than getting in. Emma was dead weight in his arms, and the window opening that had seemed adequate for one person was barely wide enough for two. Lucas had to twist and maneuver, using his legs to push against the car frame while protecting Emma's head from the jagged glass. They were almost clear when it happened. A piece of twisted metal from the door frame, sharp as a blade and hot from the spreading fire, caught Lucas's right leg, just below the knee. He felt it slice through his jeans, his skin, deeper than skin, all the way to bone. The pain was immediate and overwhelming, but he didn't let go of Emma. "Go, go, go," he muttered through gritted teeth, half dragging, half carrying Emma away from the car. His leg felt wrong, disconnected somehow, but adrenaline kept him moving. They made it perhaps 20 feet before the sedan's gas tank caught fire, with a whoosh that lit up the entire embankment. Lucas collapsed, still holding Emma, as the heat washed over them. She was unconscious now, her breathing shallow but steady. Lucas looked down at his leg and immediately wished he hadn't. The metal had done more than cut, it had nearly severed his leg just below the knee. Blood was soaking through his jeans at an alarming rate, and he could see white bone through the torn flesh. "Oh God!" he whispered, the reality of his injury hitting him as the adrenaline began to fade. He used his belt as a makeshift tourniquet, cinching it tight above the wound. The pain was indescribable, but Emma was still breathing, and that was what mattered. Lucas heard sirens in the distance. Someone else must have seen the fire. He lay back in the wet grass, one hand on Emma's pulse point, the other pressed against his mangled leg. The rain continued to fall, washing the blood from his hands and face, and for a moment he thought about Sophia. She was sleeping safely in her bed, completely unaware that her father was bleeding out on a hillside. "Don't you dare," he told himself firmly. "Don't you dare leave her alone." The first paramedic to reach them was a young woman who took one look at the scene and immediately called for additional units. Lucas watched through a haze of pain and shock as they worked on Emma first, stabilizing her neck and checking her vitals. She was alive. She was going to make it. "Sir, we need to get you to a hospital right now," another paramedic said, kneeling beside Lucas. "This is a serious injury." "The woman," Lucas managed to say, "is she okay?" "She's stable. You saved her life. Now let us save yours." As they loaded him into the ambulance, Lucas caught a glimpse of Emma on a separate stretcher. Her eyes were open, and she was looking at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Gratitude, maybe, or recognition of what his sacrifice had cost them both. The twisted car keys from Emma's sedan lay scattered in the grass where the paramedics had found them, metal warped by heat and impact. They would be collected as evidence, but their real significance was already written in blood and courage. Those keys represented the moment when two strangers' lives became forever intertwined, when an ordinary man's extraordinary choice created a debt that couldn't be measured in dollars or years. As the ambulance raced toward Cedar Falls General Hospital, Lucas drifted in and out of consciousness, the steady beep of monitors mixing with the sound of rain against the windows. He didn't know that Emma was in the ambulance behind him, or that she was conscious now and asking the paramedics about the man who'd pulled her from the wreckage. He didn't know that his life was about to change in ways that went far beyond the loss of his leg. All he knew was that Sophia would be waking up in a few hours, and somehow he had to figure out how to be the father she needed, even if he could no longer be the man he used to be. Lucas awoke to the steady beep of machines and the antiseptic smell that could only mean one thing: he was in a hospital. The fluorescent lights above his bed hummed with a frequency that made his head throb, and for a moment he couldn't remember why he was there. Then he tried to move his right leg, and the absence hit him like a physical blow. The leg was gone from just below the knee. He stared at the flat white sheet where his lower leg should have been, his mind struggling to process what his eyes were telling him. The phantom sensations were the cruelest part. He could still feel his foot, still feel his toes flexing and curling, even though the logical part of his brain knew they were no longer there. "Dad?" Sophia's voice was small and scared from the chair beside his bed. She looked tiny in the oversized visitor's chair, her legs dangling without touching the floor. Mrs. Rodriguez sat beside her, holding Sophia's hand and offering Lucas a smile that didn't quite hide her concern. "Hey, Mija," Lucas said, his voice rougher than he expected. "Come here." Sophia climbed carefully onto the bed, mindful of the various tubes and wires connected to her father. She curled up against his left side, the same way she did during their weekend movie nights, and Lucas wrapped his arm around her. "Mrs. Rodriguez told me you helped someone," Sophia said quietly, "and that you got hurt." "I did help someone," Lucas confirmed, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "A lady was trapped in her car, and I got her out. Are you going to be okay?" The question hung in the air between them, loaded with all the fears that an 8-year-old shouldn't have to carry. Lucas looked at Mrs. Rodriguez, who gave him an encouraging nod. "I'm going to be different," Lucas said carefully. "My leg was hurt so badly that the doctors had to take part of it away. But I'm alive, and I'm going to learn how to do everything I used to do, just in a new way." Sophia was quiet for a long moment, processing this information with the serious concentration she usually reserved for difficult math problems. "Will you still be able to walk me to the bus stop?" "I'll walk you to the bus stop every morning until you're too embarrassed to be seen with your old man," Lucas promised, hoping his voice sounded more confident than he felt. The doctor, a kind-faced woman named Dr. Patel, came in during visiting hours with a stack of papers that would change everything. The hospital bills were staggering: surgery, recovery, physical therapy, prosthetic fitting. Even with his basic insurance from Henderson Logistics, the out-of-pocket costs would run into the tens of thousands. There are programs that can help, Dr. Patel explained gently. Payment plans, financial assistance. You don't have to worry about this right now. But Lucas was already worrying. How could he not? He'd been living paycheck to paycheck before the accident. Now he was facing medical bills that would take decades to pay off, assuming he could find work that accommodated his new limitations. The warehouse job was obviously impossible now. The security position might be feasible, but would they even keep him on? The first piece of good news came in the form of a floral arrangement, a modest bouquet of daisies and carnations with a card that simply read, "Thank you for saving my life. Emma Caldwell." Lucas stared at the card for a long time, remembering the woman he'd pulled from the burning car. She was alive. Whatever happened to him, whatever challenges lay ahead, that knowledge made it bearable. Sophia read the card aloud, sounding out the bigger words. "Daddy, the lady you saved knows your name. I told her my name when I was helping her," Lucas explained. "That's nice that she sent flowers," Sophia said pragmatically. "We should put them by the window so they get sunshine." Over the next 3 days, Lucas learned the harsh realities of amputation recovery. The phantom pain was relentless, burning, stabbing sensations in the leg that was no longer there. The doctors explained that his brain was still sending signals to nerves that had been severed, that this was normal and would hopefully fade with time. They gave him medications that made him dizzy and nauseous, but barely touched the pain. Physical therapy started almost immediately. A cheerful therapist named Janet worked with him on basic movements, how to transfer from bed to wheelchair, how to maintain his balance on one leg, how to navigate stairs. Every small victory felt monumental, and every setback felt like failure. "I used to be able to carry Sophia on my shoulders," Lucas confided to Janet during one particularly frustrating session. "I could work 18-hour days without thinking twice about it." "And you'll find new ways to be strong for her," Janet replied. "Different doesn't mean less than." The phone calls started while he was still in the hospital. Henderson Logistics was sympathetic but practical. There was no position available that he could do from a wheelchair. His supervisor Rick visited once, genuinely sorry but unable to offer anything more than good wishes and a final paycheck. The security company was more encouraging. Desk work was definitely possible, though at reduced hours and pay. Lucas tried to hide his growing panic from Sophia, but children have a way of sensing adult anxiety. She became unusually quiet, unusually helpful, watching her father with the careful attention of someone much older. Mrs. Rodriguez had been staying with her, but that was a temporary solution. Sophia needed stability, routine, and Lucas wasn't sure he could provide either anymore. The second note from Emma came on his 4th day in the hospital. This one was longer, handwritten on cream-colored stationery that spoke of a life very different from his own. "Dear Lucas," it began, "I hope you don't mind me tracking you down through the hospital. I needed you to know that I understand what you sacrificed for me, and I will never forget it. The doctors tell me I will make a full recovery, thanks to your quick action. I know you have been injured, and I want to help in whatever way I can. Please don't hesitate to reach out. Gratefully, Emma Caldwell." She'd included her phone number and business card. Emma Caldwell, CEO, Caldwell Marketing Solutions. The card was elegant, expensive-looking. Lucas had never met a CEO before, certainly never saved one from a burning car. "She has nice handwriting," Sophia observed, reading over his shoulder. "And she put her phone number. Are you going to call her?" "I don't know, Mija. What would I say?" "You could say thank you for the flowers, and maybe ask if she's feeling better." Sophia's simple wisdom cut through his complicated adult feelings of pride and embarrassment. Of course he should call. It was the polite thing to do. But something held him back. Maybe the knowledge that accepting gratitude felt too much like accepting charity. The prosthetist, a man named David who had lost his own leg in military service, came to see Lucas on his 5th day. He brought models and brochures, explaining the different types of prosthetics available and the fitting process that lay ahead. "The technology has come a long way," David explained, showing Lucas a prosthetic leg that looked remarkably realistic. "With proper fitting and training, you'll be able to do most of the things you did before." "Most things," Lucas repeated. "Different things, maybe, but you'd be surprised what's possible. I've got clients who run marathons, climb mountains, play sports. The limitation isn't usually the prosthetic, it's the mindset. The prosthetic fitting would have to wait until his residual limb healed completely, another 6 to 8 weeks. In the meantime, he'd be using a wheelchair and crutches, learning to navigate a world that suddenly seemed full of obstacles he'd never noticed before." The discharge papers came with a stack of instructions, medication schedules, follow-up appointments, and physical therapy referrals. Lucas stared at them, overwhelmed by the complexity of his new reality. He'd gone from being a man who solved problems through hard work and determination to someone who needed help with basic daily tasks. Sophia wheeled him out of the hospital on a sunny Tuesday morning, chattering about school and friends and all the normal things that made up her world. She seemed to have accepted his new limitations with the adaptability of childhood, already figuring out which side of his wheelchair she needed to walk on, automatically slowing her pace to match his. Mrs. Rodriguez had prepared their apartment as best she could, moving furniture to create wider pathways, installing a shower chair, setting up a temporary bed in the living room, so Lucas wouldn't have to navigate stairs. But even with her thoughtful preparations, Lucas felt like a stranger in his own home. Simple tasks that he'd never thought about before, making coffee, reaching items on high shelves, even showering required planning and adaptation. His independence, something he'd guarded fiercely since Carmen left, felt fragile and conditional. That first night home, after Sophia was asleep, Lucas sat in his wheelchair by the window and looked out at the parking lot where his Honda waited. He wasn't cleared to drive yet, wouldn't be until he had a prosthetic and could pass a driving test. Another loss, another piece of the life he'd built that would have to be rebuilt from scratch. The financial reality was becoming clearer and more frightening every day. Even with insurance, the medical bills were staggering. Physical therapy wasn't fully covered. The prosthetic would cost thousands. His reduced work hours meant dramatically less income. The savings account he'd worked so hard to build was disappearing rapidly. Lucas had always prided himself on providing for Sophia without help, on never being a burden to anyone. Now, he was facing the possibility that pride might be a luxury he could no longer afford. The discharge papers lay on his coffee table like a roadmap to a future he wasn't sure he was brave enough to face, but Sophia's soft breathing from her bedroom reminded him that courage wasn't optional. He picked up Emma's business card, running his thumb over the embossed letters. Tomorrow, maybe, he'd find the strength to call. The prosthetic clinic smelled like rubber and antiseptic, a sterile environment that couldn't quite mask the underlying scent of human struggle. Lucas sat on the examination table, his residual limb exposed and measured by David, the prosthetist who had become both technician and counselor over the past 6 weeks. "The swelling has gone down nicely," David observed, running his hands along the surgical site with practiced gentleness. "We can start the fitting process now. This first prosthetic will be basic, a learning leg, we call it. Once you've mastered the fundamentals, we can look at more advanced options." The prosthetic leg that David showed him looked alien, and mechanical metal joints, plastic components, none of the sleek sophistication from the brochures. But it was functional, and right now, function mattered more than form. "The first time you put it on, it's going to feel strange," David warned. "Foreign. Some people describe it as wearing a tool rather than a body part. That feeling will improve with time and practice." Sophia sat in the corner, reading a book about a girl who rode horses. She'd insisted on coming to every appointment, appointed herself Lucas's official support team, Sometimes Lucas wondered if she was taking care of him more than he was taking care of her. The fitting process was more complex than Lucas had expected. David made adjustments to the socket, the part that would attach to his residual limb, checking for pressure points and comfort. Lucas had to walk between parallel bars, his movements awkward and unsteady as his brain tried to remember how to tell his missing foot to step. "It's like learning to walk all over again," Lucas muttered, sweat beading on his forehead from the effort of taking just a few steps. "Exactly like that," David agreed. "Most people learn to walk as toddlers when their brains are incredibly adaptable. You're doing it as an adult, which is harder, but you have advantages too: determination, understanding of the goal, and a very good reason to succeed." He gestured towards Sophia, who looked up from her book and gave Lucas an encouraging thumbs up. Over the following weeks, Lucas threw himself into learning to use the prosthetic with the same determination he'd once applied to working double shifts. The parallel bars became his workplace, the clinic his second home. Some days were better than others. Some days he could walk the length of the bars without thinking about it. Other days, the phantom pain was so intense that he could barely concentrate on the simple act of placing one foot in front of the other. The job search was even more discouraging than the physical therapy. Lucas had applied for dozens of positions, always disclosing his amputation up front to avoid awkward surprises in interviews. Most applications disappeared into silence. The few interviews he did get often felt like exercises in polite rejection. "We'll certainly keep your application on file," became a phrase he learned to dread. Secure All Services had offered him part-time desk work, monitoring security cameras, filing reports, answering phones. The pay was barely half what he'd been making before, and there were no benefits. Lucas took it anyway, grateful for any income at all. Sophia's teacher, Mrs. Peterson, had called twice to express concern about changes in Sophia's behavior. She was still performing well academically, but she'd become withdrawn during recess, preferring to read alone rather than play with classmates. "She's dealing with a lot of adult stress for a little girl," Mrs. Peterson had said gently during their phone conversation. "Is there any way to get her some counseling support?" Counseling, another expense Lucas couldn't afford, another reminder of how his injury had affected everyone in their small family unit. Sophia came home from school one afternoon with a drawing she'd made a stick-figure family that included her, Lucas, and a woman with yellow hair standing beside a car. The woman was holding hands with both of them, and everyone was smiling. "Who's the lady with the yellow hair?" Lucas asked, though he suspected he already knew. "That's Emma," Sophia said matter-of-factly. "The lady you saved. I thought maybe she'd want to be friends with us." "Why do you think that, Mija?" "Because she keeps sending us cards." It was true. Emma had sent a card every week since the accident, sometimes with small gifts for Sophia, sometimes just notes asking how Lucas was feeling. The latest had contained a gift card to Sophia's favorite bookstore, along with a note saying she hoped Sophia would pick out something special. Lucas had never responded to any of them, paralyzed by a combination of pride and uncertainty. What did a CEO want with a disabled warehouse worker? Her gratitude was genuine. He believed that. But gratitude had a way of fading when the immediate crisis passed. The eviction notice arrived on a Tuesday, stark and official, giving them 30 days to catch up on rent or vacate the premises. Lucas stared at the paper, calculating and recalculating numbers that didn't add up. Between medical bills, reduced income, and ongoing expenses, he'd fallen 3 months behind on rent. He'd hidden the financial stress from Sophia, but children notice when their parents stop sleeping, when mail gets stuffed into drawers instead of opened, when conversations with adults happen in whispers after bedtime. Sophia found the notice Thursday morning, having gotten up early to make herself breakfast so Lucas could sleep in after a particularly difficult night with phantom pain. "Papa," she said quietly, climbing onto his bed with the paper in her hands. "What does this mean?" Lucas looked at his daughter, 8 years old, and already too familiar with adult problems, and felt something break inside his chest. He'd sworn to protect her from this kind of uncertainty, and he was failing. "It means we might have to move," he said honestly, because lying to Sophia had never been an option in their relationship. "Where would we go? I don't know yet. But we'll figure it out together, okay?" Sophia nodded solemnly, but Lucas could see the fear in her eyes, the same fear he felt every morning when he looked at his dwindling bank balance. That afternoon, while Sophia was at school, Lucas did something he'd been avoiding for weeks. He called Emma Caldwell. The phone rang twice before a professional-sounding receptionist answered. "Caldwell Marketing Solutions, how may I help you?" "I'd like to speak to Emma Caldwell, please. This is Lucas Martinez." "Oh, Mr. Martinez, please hold on. I'll get her right away." The enthusiasm in the receptionist's voice suggested that Emma had mentioned him, prepared her staff for a possible call. Lucas wasn't sure if that made him feel better or more nervous. "Lucas?" Emma's voice was warm, genuinely pleased. "I'm so glad you called. How are you feeling?" "Better," Lucas said, which was both true and completely inadequate. "I wanted to thank you for all the cards. And the gifts for Sophia. You didn't need to do that. I wanted to. How is Sophia? I hope she liked the bookstore gift card." "She did. She picked out 3 books about horses and has read them all twice." There was a comfortable pause, and Lucas realized that talking to Emma felt natural, not forced or awkward as he'd expected. "Lucas," Emma said carefully, "I hope this doesn't sound presumptuous, but I'd love to meet you both for coffee or lunch. I feel like I owe you so much more than flowers and gift cards." "You don't owe me anything," Lucas said automatically. "I owe you my life," Emma replied simply, "and I'd like to thank you properly, if you'd let me." Lucas looked around their small apartment, at the eviction notice still lying on the coffee table, at Sophia's drawings covering the refrigerator, including the one where Emma stood with their family, smiling. "Okay," he said finally, "I think Sophia would like that." They arranged to meet Saturday afternoon at a family restaurant downtown, somewhere Sophia would be comfortable and Lucas could navigate easily with his prosthetic. After hanging up, Lucas felt a mixture of anticipation and anxiety that he couldn't quite name. Sophia was thrilled when he told her about the lunch plan. She immediately began planning what to wear, what to tell Emma about school, what questions to ask about the accident. "Do you think she'll like me?" Sophia asked that evening as Lucas helped her practice walking with his prosthetic in the living room. "I think she'll love you," Lucas said honestly. "You're pretty easy to love." That night, as Sophia slept, Lucas sat by the window practicing with his prosthetic. The movements were becoming more natural, less conscious. He still couldn't run or jump, probably never would, but he could walk Sophia to the bus stop again. He could stand to cook dinner, could navigate stairs slowly but successfully. David had been right, the prosthetic wasn't a replacement for his lost leg, but it was a tool that gave him back pieces of independence he'd thought were gone forever. Different didn't mean less than, even if it sometimes felt that way. Saturday morning, Lucas helped Sophia pick out her best dress, a blue one with tiny flowers that had been a birthday gift from Mrs. Rodriguez. He chose a button-down shirt and his least worn pair of jeans, wanting to make a good impression without looking like he was trying too hard. As they waited for the bus that would take them downtown, Sophia slipped her hand into his. "Papa," she said thoughtfully, "do you think Emma really wants to be our friend, or is she just being polite?" It was a perceptive question, one that revealed how carefully Sophia had been thinking about their situation. "I guess we'll find out," Lucas said, "but either way, it's nice of her to want to meet us." The bus pulled up, hydraulic brakes hissing as it lowered to accommodate Lucas's mobility needs. As they found seats, Sophia pressed her face to the window, excited about the adventure ahead. Lucas felt a flutter of hope he hadn't experienced in weeks. Maybe this lunch would just be a polite thank you, a way for Emma to close the chapter on their shared trauma. But maybe, just maybe, It could be the beginning of something neither of them expected, a friendship that could help them both heal from the night that had changed everything. 3 months post-accident, Lucas Martinez stared at the eviction notice in his hands with the kind of detached calm that comes after panic has exhausted itself. 30 days. They had 30 days to come up with 3 months back rent plus late fees, or find somewhere else to live. The numbers on his latest bank statement showed 247.83, enough for groceries for maybe 2 weeks, if he was careful. The medical bills had consumed everything. Despite insurance covering the major surgery costs, the endless stream of copays, physical therapy sessions, prosthetic fittings, and medications had drained his savings and pushed him deeper into debt each month. His part-time desk job at Secure-All barely covered utilities and Sophia's basic needs, leaving nothing for rent. Lucas had become an expert at hiding financial stress from his daughter, but 8-year-olds notice when their fathers stop sleeping, when groceries shift from name brands to generic, when conversations with adults happen in hushed, worried tones after bedtime. Sophia had started being extra helpful, extra good, as if her perfect behavior could somehow fix whatever was making Papa so tired all the time. Mr. Martinez? The landlord, Harold Brennan, stood in the doorway with an expression that mixed genuine sympathy with business necessity. "I'm sorry, Mr. Martinez," became the refrain of the evening. "Our emergency assistance fund is depleted. There's a 6-month waiting list for rental assistance. Have you considered staying with family?" Family. Lucas almost laughed at that suggestion. His parents had died in a car accident when he was 22. Carmen's family had made it clear they blamed him for their daughter's decision to leave. Mrs. Rodriguez had offered to let them stay temporarily, but her 1-bedroom apartment was barely large enough for her own family. Emma's 3rd letter arrived on Thursday, hand-delivered by a professional courier service. This one was different from the previous thank you notes, longer, more personal, written on cream-colored stationery that spoke of a world very different from his own. "Dear Lucas," it began, "I hope you don't mind the personal delivery, but I wanted to make sure this reached you. I've been thinking about our conversation, and I feel there's so much more I want to say about what you did for me that night. I know you've been dealing with your own recovery, and I hope you won't think me presumptuous, but I'd very much like to help in whatever way I can. I understand that accepting help can be difficult. I've been in situations where pride and necessity were at odds, but sometimes letting others help is a gift to them as well. Would you consider meeting me for coffee? I promise this isn't charity, it's gratitude from someone whose life you literally saved. Warmly, Emma." She'd included her personal cell phone number with a note saying she'd love to meet Sophia as well, if that would be appropriate. Lucas read the letter 3 times, each reading revealing new layers of thoughtfulness. Emma understood the pride issue. She'd framed her offer carefully, respectfully. But Lucas's experience with successful business people was limited, and he couldn't shake the feeling that accepting help from someone he'd saved might create an uncomfortable dynamic. Sophia read the letter over his shoulder, sounding out the bigger words. "She has really nice handwriting," she observed, "and she wants to meet me." "What do you think about that?" Lucas asked. "I think she seems nice, and she sends good presents." Sophia gestured toward the bookshelf, where Emma's gifts were prominently displayed, 3 books about horses and a stuffed animal that Sophia had named Charlotte after the spider in her favorite story. "Papa," Sophia said thoughtfully, "why don't you want to call her?" The question caught Lucas off guard with its directness. "What makes you think I don't want to call her?" "Because you get the same look you get when you're trying to fix something but you don't have the right tools." Sometimes Sophia's perceptiveness was startling. She'd accurately identified his internal struggle, wanting to solve their problems independently, while recognizing that he might not have the resources to do so. That weekend, Lucas took Sophia to the public library so she could research butterflies for her science project. While she was absorbed in picture books about metamorphosis, he used the computers to research Emma Caldwell online. Caldwell Marketing Solutions was a mid-sized firm specializing in digital marketing for healthcare companies. Emma had founded it 8 years ago after working for larger agencies in Chicago. The company's website featured testimonials from satisfied clients and photos of a modern office space with glass conference rooms and ergonomic furniture. Emma's professional biography was impressive: MBA from Northwestern, various industry awards, involvement in local business organizations. But what struck Lucas most were the photos from charity events where Emma was volunteering at food banks, participating in fundraisers for children's hospitals, coaching youth soccer teams. This wasn't someone who helped others for tax write-offs or social media attention. This was someone who understood community service as a personal responsibility. "Find anything interesting about butterflies?" Lucas asked Sophia as they packed up to leave. "Did you know that caterpillars basically dissolve completely inside their cocoons?" Sophia said excitedly. "They turn into soup, and then somehow they become butterflies. Mrs. Peterson says it's called metamorphosis." "That's pretty amazing," Lucas agreed, thinking about transformations and second chances. Monday morning brought more bad news. Lucas's supervisor at Secure All called to inform him that they were restructuring the department and his position was being eliminated. 2 weeks' notice, a small severance package, and sincere apologies about the timing. "I wish we could keep you on, Lucas," his supervisor said. "You're reliable and professional, but corporate is cutting costs and part-time positions are the first to go." Lucas hung up the phone and stared at the eviction notice, still magneted to their refrigerator. Without even his part-time income, they had perhaps 2 weeks before the money ran out completely. He found Sophia's drawing of the stick-figure family again herself, him, and the yellow-haired woman holding hands beside a car. It was remarkably prescient for a child's imagination, this vision of their family expanding to include someone who might care about their welfare. That afternoon, while Sophia was at school, Lucas made the call. Emma answered on the second ring. "Lucas, I was hoping you'd call. How are you?" "I've been better," he admitted, "but Sophia is excited about the possibility of meeting you." "I'm excited to meet her too. I have to confess, I've been researching horse books, so I'll have something intelligent to say about her latest reading obsession." The fact that Emma had remembered Sophia's interest in horses, had taken time to research the topic, spoke volumes about her character. "Emma," Lucas said carefully, "I need to be honest about our situation. Things have gotten pretty complicated since the accident." "I imagine they have. Would you like to talk about it over coffee or lunch? Whatever works best for Sophia's schedule." They arranged to meet Saturday at a family restaurant downtown, somewhere Sophia would be comfortable and Lucas could navigate easily. As he hung up, Lucas felt a strange mixture of hope and anxiety. Emma's gratitude seemed genuine, but gratitude had a way of evolving into pity, and pity was something Lucas couldn't bear. Sophia was thrilled when he told her about the lunch plans. She immediately began strategizing what to wear, what to tell Emma about school, what questions to ask about the accident. "Do you think she'll like me?" Sophia asked, as Lucas helped her practice reading her butterfly report aloud. "I think she'll love you," Lucas said honestly. "You're pretty easy to love." Friday evening, as they prepared for the meeting, Sophia made another observation that stopped Lucas in his tracks. "Papa, I think maybe Emma needs friends too." "What makes you say that?" "Because she keeps writing to us, even though we never write back. That's what I do when I really want to be friends with someone. I keep trying, even if they're shy." Lucas looked at his daughter, 8 years old, and already wiser about human nature than he was. Maybe Emma's persistence wasn't about guilt or obligation. Maybe it was about connection, about two people whose lives had intersected in trauma, discovering they had more in common than they'd expected. The eviction notice seemed less ominous somehow, still a serious problem but no longer an insurmountable one. Maybe accepting help wasn't a sign of failure. Maybe it was a sign of wisdom, an acknowledgement that everyone needed community, especially during the hard times that life inevitably delivered. Saturday couldn't come fast enough. I'm sorry about this. I really am. But I've got my own bills to pay. I understand, Lucas said, because he did. Brennan wasn't a villain. He was a working man who owned 3 rental properties and needed the income to support his own family. I'm working on it. If you can get caught up by the end of the month, we can work something out, Brennan offered. But I can't carry you much longer. After Brennan left, Lucas sat at their small kitchen table and did the math again, hoping somehow the numbers would be different this time. They weren't. Even if he could find full-time work tomorrow, which was unlikely given his limitations, he couldn't catch up on 3 months of back rent in 30 days. Sophia came home from school that afternoon with her usual cheerful energy, chattering about a science project on butterflies and asking if they could go to the library to research metamorphosis. Lucas listened and nodded, trying to match her enthusiasm while his mind churned through impossible calculations. It was Sophia who found the eviction notice 3 days later. Lucas had hidden it in a kitchen drawer, but she'd been looking for batteries for her calculator and found it instead. "Papa," she said quietly, the official document looking enormous in her small hands. "What does vacate the premises mean?" Lucas felt his heart break a little. Sophia was too young to understand legal terminology, but she was smart enough to recognize bad news when she saw it. "It means we might have to move to a different apartment," he said carefully, sitting down so they were at eye level. "Why?" "Because Papa hasn't been able to pay all the rent since I got hurt." Sophia was quiet for a long moment, processing this information with the serious concentration she usually reserved for homework. "Where would we move to?" "I don't know yet," Lucas admitted, "but we'll figure it out together." The truth was grimmer than he could tell her. Lucas had been researching options for weeks. Cheaper apartments required security deposits he couldn't afford. His credit score had plummeted due to missed payments. Most landlords wouldn't consider a tenant with recent eviction proceedings. The waiting list for low-income housing assistance was 2 years long. That evening, while Sophia worked on her butterfly project at the kitchen table, Lucas made phone calls. He swallowed his pride and reached out to every social service agency in the county, explaining their situation with the same calm professionalism he used to use when reporting security incidents. The Cornerstone Cafe was exactly the kind of place Lucas had hoped for. Family-friendly, accessible, with worn wooden tables that had witnessed countless conversations over the years. He and Sophia arrived 15 minutes early, a habit ingrained from years of punctuality being essential to keeping jobs. Sophia wore her best dress, the blue one with tiny flowers, and had spent 20 minutes that morning practicing how to shake hands, like a grown-up. Emma arrived precisely on time, and Lucas recognized her immediately, despite the months that had passed since that rainy night. She was smaller than he remembered, probably around 5'4", with shoulder-length blonde hair and intelligent green eyes. The scar above her left eyebrow was barely visible, but Lucas could see it because he knew where to look. "Lucas," she said warmly, extending her hand, "it's so good to see you again, and you must be Sophia." Sophia executed her practiced handshake with serious concentration. "It's very nice to meet you, Mrs. Caldwell. Thank you for the books about horses. I've read them all 3 times. Please, call me Emma. And I'm so glad you enjoyed them. I have to admit, I learned quite a bit about horses myself while picking them out." They settled into a corner booth, Sophia sliding in beside Lucas, while Emma sat across from them. The business card she'd given Lucas months ago lay between them on the table. Emma Caldwell, CEO, Caldwell Marketing Solutions. The elegant typography seemed to bridge their 2 very different worlds. "I have to say," Emma continued, "your letters about horses were far more educational than most business correspondence I receive." "I didn't write you any letters," Sophia said, confused. Emma smiled. I was making a joke, but I'd love to hear about what you've learned about horses if you'd like to tell me. As Sophia launched into an enthusiastic explanation of the difference between Clydesdales and Arabians, Lucas found himself studying Emma more carefully. She was professionally dressed, but not ostentatiously so, a simple blouse and cardigan that looked expensive, but understated. More importantly, she was giving Sophia her complete attention, asking follow-up questions and responding with genuine interest rather than the polite tolerance many adults showed toward children's enthusiasms. "What's your favorite thing about horses?" Emma asked Sophia. "I think it's how they take care of each other," Sophia said thoughtfully. "In one of the books, it talked about how horses in the wild will protect the babies and help each other find food. They're like a family even when they're not related." Emma glanced at Lucas over Sophia's head, and he saw something in her expression, recognition, perhaps, of the wisdom contained in his daughter's simple observation. Their waitress brought menus, and Emma insisted that Sophia and Lucas order whatever they wanted. "This is my treat," she said firmly when Lucas started to protest. "I've been looking forward to this for months." Over lunch, the conversation flowed more naturally than Lucas had expected. Emma asked Sophia about school, her favorite subjects, her friends. She listened to Lucas's update on his physical therapy progress and his adaptation to the prosthetic with the kind of focused attention that made him feel heard rather than pitied. "I have to ask," Emma said carefully when Sophia excused herself to wash her hands. "How are you managing? I mean, I know this has been an enormous adjustment." Lucas had prepared for this question, had practiced various responses that would maintain his dignity while acknowledging reality. But sitting across from Emma, seeing genuine concern in her eyes, he found himself being more honest than he'd intended. "It's been challenging," he admitted. "I lost both my jobs after the accident. The medical bills have been significant. We're facing some housing issues." "Housing issues?" "We received an eviction notice. I've fallen behind on rent, and I haven't been able to catch up." Emma was quiet for a moment, and Lucas worried he'd said too much, revealed too much vulnerability. But when she spoke, her voice was gentle. "Lucas, I need to tell you something. What you did that night, pulling me from that car, you saved my life. Literally. The fire department investigator said I had maybe 2 minutes before the car was completely engulfed. You risked everything for a complete stranger. Anyone would have done the same thing." "No," Emma said firmly. "They wouldn't have. Most people would have called 911 and waited for professionals. You didn't hesitate, even when it meant putting yourself in danger." Sophia returned from the bathroom and climbed back into the booth, immediately sensing the more serious tone of the conversation. "Papa's a hero," she announced matter-of-factly. "Mrs. Peterson told our whole class about how he saved someone's life." "She's absolutely right," Emma agreed, "and heroes shouldn't have to worry about having a place to live." Lucas felt heat rise in his cheeks. "Emma, I appreciate the sentiment, but we'll figure something out. We always do." "I'm sure you will, but what if you didn't have to figure it out alone?" Emma reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. "I've been carrying this around for weeks, trying to work up the courage to give it to you. It's not charity, Lucas. It's a debt." "I don't want your money," Lucas said automatically. "It's not my money," Emma replied. "It's money that should have been yours all along." She opened the envelope and pulled out a check. Lucas's eyes widened when he saw the amount enough to cover his back rent, his outstanding medical bills, and several months of living expenses. "I can't accept this," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Papa," Sophia said quietly, "remember what you told me about Charlotte's Web? How Charlotte saved Wilbur even though she was just a spider?" Lucas looked at his daughter, confused by the connection she was making. "You said that sometimes when someone saves you, you want to save them back. Maybe that's what Emma is trying to do." Emma smiled. "Sophia is very wise. I've been successful in business, Lucas. Very successful. This money represents what I might have lost in billable hours if I'd been seriously injured or killed in that accident. You gave me back my life and my livelihood. Let me give you back yours. There's more, Emma continued. I've been thinking about this for months, actually. My company has been growing, and I need someone I can trust completely. Someone with integrity, with good judgment under pressure, with proven character. She pulled out another business card, this one blank except for handwritten text. Lucas Martinez, security consultant, Caldwell Marketing Solutions. I'm offering you a job, Emma said. Full-time, with benefits, with a salary that will let you provide for Sophia the way you want to. You'd be responsible for physical security, risk assessment, some driving when I need to attend off-site meetings. It's not charity, it's a business partnership with someone whose character I've seen firsthand. Lucas stared at the business card, his mind reeling. Emma, I appreciate this more than you know, but I'm not sure I'm qualified for. You saved my life with a twisted leg and a pocket knife, Emma interrupted. You navigated a crisis situation under extreme pressure and made decisions that kept both of us alive. Those are exactly the qualifications I'm looking for. Sophia was practically bouncing in her seat with excitement. Papa, does this mean we don't have to move? Lucas looked at his daughter's hopeful face, then at Emma's earnest expression, then at the check that could solve their immediate problems and the business card that could secure their future. Why? He asked quietly. Why go to all this trouble for someone you barely know? Emma was quiet for a moment, considering her answer. Do you want the business answer or the personal one? Both. Business answer. I need someone I can trust completely, and trust isn't something you can buy or teach. It's something you demonstrate under pressure. Personal answer. She paused, looking down at her hands. I was in a very dark place when that accident happened. My marriage was falling apart, my business was consuming my life, and I felt like I was just going through the motions. When I woke up in that hospital and realized that a stranger had risked everything to save me, it reminded me that there are still good people in the world. People who act from courage and compassion rather than self-interest. She looked directly at Lucas. You didn't just save my life that night. You reminded me what life was worth saving for. The restaurant bustled around them, families enjoying weekend lunches, but at their corner table, 3 people sat in a bubble of possibility and hope. If I said yes, Lucas said carefully, this would be a real job, not a favor or a gesture. Real job, Emma confirmed. Real responsibilities, real expectations. I'm not offering you charity, Lucas. I'm offering you a partnership with someone whose integrity I've seen proven under fire. Sophia reached over and touched the business card. It has your name on it, Papa. Lucas picked up the card, feeling the weight of quality paper, the embossed lettering that matched Emma's. His name, his title, a future he hadn't dared to imagine. Okay, he said finally. Yes, thank you. Emma's smile lit up her entire face. Thank you. I think this is going to be the beginning of a wonderful partnership. As they left the restaurant, Sophia walking between Lucas and Emma, chattering about horses and heroes and new beginnings, Lucas realized that sometimes the most extraordinary changes came disguised as ordinary conversations over lunch. The business card in his pocket felt like a bridge between the man he used to be and the man he was becoming. Proof that courage could be rewarded and that accepting help didn't diminish strength, it multiplied it. Emma's silver BMW sat in the parking lot of Lucas's apartment complex like a question mark against the backdrop of older, well-worn vehicles. She'd called that morning, 3 weeks after their lunch meeting, asking if she could stop by with something important to discuss. Lucas had spent the morning tidying their small apartment, though Emma had already demonstrated that she judged people by character rather than circumstances. When she knocked, Sophia answered the door with characteristic enthusiasm. Emma, Papa, Emma's here. I can see that, mija, Lucas said, following Sophia to the door. Come in, please. Can I get you some coffee? That would be lovely, thank you. Emma stepped inside, glancing around the apartment with the same respectful attention she'd given Sophia's horse stories. "You have a beautiful home. I love Sophia's artwork on the refrigerator." While Lucas made coffee, Emma and Sophia settled on the couch, continuing their ongoing conversation about horses. Sophia had been drawing pictures of different breeds and saving them to show Emma, who had somehow become an honorary expert on the subject. "I brought something for you," Emma said, reaching into her purse and pulling out a small wrapped package. "It's not much, just something I saw that made me think of you." Sophia unwrapped it carefully to reveal a small silver pendant in the shape of a horse, suspended on a delicate chain. "It's beautiful," she breathed. "Papa, look." Lucas examined the pendant, noting the quality of the craftsmanship. This wasn't a token gift from a drugstore. This was jewelry that had required thought and investment. "Emma, this is too much," he started to protest. "It's exactly enough," Emma said firmly. "Besides, I have ulterior motives. I wanted Sophia to have something special from me, because what I'm about to ask is going to change all of our lives." She reached into her briefcase and pulled out a set of car keys attached to a BMW keychain. The keys caught the afternoon light streaming through their small living room window. "Lucas, I need to ask you something, and I want you to hear me out completely before you answer." Lucas sat down across from them, noting the unusual gravity in Emma's voice. "These are the keys to my car," Emma continued, holding them up. "I'm not loaning it to you. I'm not gifting it to you. I'm giving it to you permanently, along with a proposition that I hope you'll consider." "Emma, please, let me finish." She took a breath. "My company has been growing faster than I expected. I need a security consultant, yes, but I also need someone I can trust completely. Someone who can drive me to meetings, assess potential risks, handle confidential information, and basically serve as my right hand in situations that require absolute discretion." She set the keys on the coffee table between them. "This car comes with the job, not as a perk, but as a necessity. You'll need reliable transportation, and this vehicle has the safety features and professional appearance that the position requires." Sophia was looking back and forth between the adults, clearly sensing the magnitude of what was being discussed, but not entirely understanding the implications. "The salary we discussed would be enough to cover your current expenses and put money away for Sophia's future," Emma continued. "But there's something else I need to tell you. Something that makes this arrangement more complicated than a typical employer-employee relationship." Lucas felt a familiar tension in his stomach, the same feeling he'd had right before the warehouse supervisor had told him his position was being eliminated. "My marriage is ending," Emma said quietly. "My husband and I have been separated for 6 months, and we're proceeding with divorce. Richard has been less than supportive of my involvement with you and Sophia." "What kind of involvement?" Lucas asked carefully. "He thinks I'm being foolish, throwing good money after bad by helping the man who saved my life. He's suggested that my gratitude has become an unhealthy obsession, that I'm trying to assuage guilt by playing savior myself." Emma's hands were clasped tightly in her lap, and Lucas could see that this conversation was difficult for her. "Is he right?" Lucas asked. "No," Emma said without hesitation. "Richard sees the world in terms of transactions and obligations. He doesn't understand that sometimes people help each other simply because it's the right thing to do. He certainly doesn't understand that the person who saved my life has become someone I genuinely care about." Sophia was still examining her pendant, but Lucas could tell she was listening to every word. "Richard is trying to challenge my ability to make business decisions," Emma continued. "He's claiming that hiring you represents poor judgment, that I'm allowing emotion to cloud my business sense. He's threatened to make this an issue in our divorce proceedings." The pieces were falling into place now, and Lucas didn't like the picture they were forming. "Emma, I can't be the reason your divorce gets complicated. If hiring me is going to cause you problems, it's going to cause him problems." Emma interrupted, "Because I'm not backing down. Richard thinks he can control my business decisions the same way he tried to control every other aspect of our marriage. He's wrong." She leaned forward, her voice becoming more intense. Lucas, what I'm offering you isn't charity or guilt or some misguided attempt to fix my own problems. It's a business partnership with someone whose character I trust completely. Yes, it started because you saved my life, but it's continuing because I've seen who you are as a person, as a father, as a man of integrity. Lucas looked at the BMW keys lying on their second-hand coffee table, silver and substantial, representing possibilities he'd never imagined. There's one more thing, Emma said. I need you to know that taking this job means you'll be entering my world, and my world comes with complications. Richard has money, connections, and the ability to make things difficult for people he sees as threats. I won't lie to you, there may be challenges ahead. What kind of challenges? Legal pressure, attempts to discredit you professionally, maybe even private investigators trying to find anything they can use against us. Richard plays hardball when he doesn't get his way. Sophia looked up from her pendant. Is Richard a bad man? Emma considered the question seriously. Richard is a man who thinks he should get to control other people's choices. That doesn't make him evil, but it doesn't make him right either. Lucas studied Emma's face, looking for any sign that she wasn't being completely honest with him. He saw determination, yes, but also vulnerability and something that looked like hope. Why is this so important to you? He asked. Why fight for someone you barely know? Because, Emma said simply, in 8 years of marriage, Richard never once put himself at risk for my benefit. Not physically, not emotionally, not financially. He's a good provider and a successful businessman, but he's never shown me the kind of selfless courage you demonstrated without thinking twice. She picked up the keys and held them out to Lucas. I'm not asking you to save me again, Lucas. I'm asking you to let me save myself with your help. This job, this partnership, it's not about guilt or obligation. It's about building something better for all of us. Lucas took the keys, feeling their weight in his palm. They were warm from Emma's hands and represented more than transportation. They represented trust, opportunity, and the kind of second chance that most people only dreamed about. There's something I need to tell you too, he said quietly. I've never worked in an office environment. I've never been responsible for someone else's safety in a professional capacity. I'm learning to live with a prosthetic leg, and some days are better than others. You might be putting your trust in someone who can't live up to your expectations. You pulled me out of a burning car with a crushed leg, Emma replied. I think you can handle corporate security and driving responsibilities. Sophia had been listening to the entire conversation with the serious attention she usually reserved for difficult homework problems. Now she spoke up with characteristic directness. Emma, are you asking Papa to be your friend and your worker? I'm asking him to be my partner, Emma said. Someone I can count on, and someone who can count on me. Sophia nodded as if this made perfect sense. Papa, I think you should say yes. Emma needs friends too, and you're really good at taking care of people. Lucas looked at his daughter, whose simple wisdom often cut through adult complications with startling clarity. Then he looked at Emma, who was offering him not just a job but a chance to rebuild his life on his own terms. Okay, he said finally. Yes, but with conditions. Name them. This has to be a real job with real expectations. If I'm not meeting your standards, you need to tell me. And if Richard or anyone else tries to cause problems for Sophia, I walk away. Her safety and stability come first. Agreed, Emma said immediately. And Lucas, thank you for saving my life and for saving it again by agreeing to this partnership. As Emma left that afternoon, Lucas stood at the window, watching her walk to a taxi she'd given him her car, he realized, and now needed alternative transportation home. Sophia stood beside him, wearing her new pendant and holding the BMW keys like sacred artifacts. Papa, she said thoughtfully, I think maybe Emma was meant to be in that car crash so you could save her and she could save us back. Lucas looked down at his daughter, wise beyond her years and optimistic in the way that only children can be. Maybe she was right. Maybe some accidents weren't accidents at all, but opportunities disguised as disasters, chances for ordinary people to discover their extraordinary capacity for courage and kindness. The BMW keys felt solid and real in his hand, a tangible symbol of trust and new beginnings. Tomorrow, he would start his new job as Emma Caldwell's security consultant and driver. Tonight, he would tell Sophia that they could stay in their apartment, that her life would be stable and secure, that sometimes heroes really did get happy endings. 3 months into his new position with Caldwell Marketing Solutions, Lucas had settled into a routine that felt both professional and surprisingly comfortable. His days were split between driving Emma to client meetings, conducting security assessments of potential office locations, and managing the practical details that allowed her to focus on growing her business. The BMW had become as familiar as his old Honda, and his prosthetic leg no longer felt like an obstacle to his professional responsibilities. Emma's office suite occupied the top floor of a renovated brick building downtown, with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered views of the river and the kind of modern furniture that suggested success without ostentation. Lucas had his own office adjacent to Emma's, equipped with security monitors, filing systems for confidential documents, and a desk where he could coordinate her schedule and handle the administrative details she preferred to delegate. Their working relationship had evolved into something that felt like genuine partnership. Emma consulted him on business decisions, trusted him with sensitive client information, and had given him authority to make security-related choices without prior approval. More importantly, she had kept her word about treating their arrangement as legitimate employment rather than elaborate charity. Sophia was thriving with the stability their new situation provided. She joined the after-school art program, made new friends, and had started talking about wanting to learn to ride horses, a goal that no longer seemed financially impossible. Her drawings had evolved to include not just horses, but also pictures of Emma as a regular part of their family, always smiling and usually holding hands with both Lucas and Sophia. The first signs of trouble had started 6 weeks ago, when Emma's divorce attorney called to inform her that Richard was challenging her business competency as part of the divorce proceedings. He was claiming that her decision to hire Lucas demonstrated poor judgment and emotional instability, arguing that she was allowing gratitude to cloud her business sense. "He's demanding financial records for the company," Emma had explained to Lucas after a particularly tense meeting with her lawyer. "He wants to prove that hiring you was financially irresponsible." "Is it?" Lucas had asked. "Financially irresponsible?" "Absolutely not," Emma had replied firmly. "Company revenues are up 30% since you started. Client satisfaction scores are higher than they've ever been, and I'm able to focus on business development instead of worrying about logistics and security. You've more than earned your salary." But Richard wasn't limiting his challenges to business competency. Private investigators had appeared at Sophia's school, asking questions about Lucas's background and his relationship with Emma. Neighbors at their apartment complex had been contacted by people claiming to be conducting background checks for employment purposes. Most disturbing, someone had been following Sophia home from school, maintaining enough distance to avoid being threatening but close enough to be noticed. Lucas had immediately increased security protocols. He now drove Sophia to and from school personally, had installed additional locks on their apartment door, and had begun varying their routes and schedules to make surveillance more difficult. Emma had hired a private security firm to provide additional protection, but the psychological impact of being watched was taking its toll on all of them. "I don't understand why Richard is doing this," Sophia had said one evening after Lucas explained why they needed to be extra careful about strangers. "Emma is nice. Why doesn't he want her to be happy?" It was a question that Lucas struggled to answer in terms an 8-year-old could understand. How do you explain that some people view relationships as competitions, that Richard saw Lucas not as a man who'd saved his wife's life, but as a threat to his control over the divorce proceedings? Emma's stress was evident in ways that went beyond the legal complications. She'd lost weight, had trouble sleeping, and had started checking her phone obsessively for updates from her attorney. The confident businesswoman who'd offered Lucas a partnership was still there, but she was fighting battles on multiple fronts, and the strain was showing. "I never should have gotten you involved in this," she'd said one afternoon, after learning that Richard's legal team was demanding depositions from both Lucas and Sophia regarding the nature of their relationship with Emma. "You didn't get me involved," Lucas had replied. "I got myself involved when I decided to pull you out of that car. Everything since then has been our choice." The breaking point came on a Tuesday afternoon when Sophia's teacher called Lucas at work. A man claiming to be a social worker had attempted to interview Sophia during recess, asking questions about her living situation and whether she felt safe at home. The school had followed proper protocols and refused to allow the interview, but the incident had frightened Sophia and alarmed the administration. "This has gone too far," Lucas told Emma that evening. They were in her office, discussing security measures, while Sophia worked on homework in the conference room, where she could be supervised but not overhear adult conversations she shouldn't be burdened with. "I know," Emma said quietly. "My attorney says Richard is trying to establish that I'm making irrational decisions that could affect a child's welfare. He's building a case that my judgment is compromised." "Maybe it would be better if I resigned," Lucas said carefully, "if my presence here is causing you legal problems." "No," Emma said firmly. "Absolutely not. Richard doesn't get to control my business decisions or my friendships. If I back down now, he'll know that intimidation works." Lucas studied Emma's face, noting the determined set of her jaw and the fire in her eyes that reminded him of Sophia when she'd made up her mind about something important. "There's something else," Emma continued. "Something I haven't told you because I didn't want to complicate our working relationship." Lucas felt a familiar tension in his stomach, the same feeling that preceded difficult news. "My feelings for you have evolved beyond gratitude," Emma said quietly. "Beyond friendship, even. I care about you and Sophia in ways that have nothing to do with that night on the highway." The admission hung in the air between them, changing the dynamic of everything they'd built together. Lucas had sensed the growing connection, had felt his own feelings shifting from gratitude to respect to something deeper, but he'd assumed it was one-sided, a result of his own emotional vulnerability after the accident. "Emma, I'm not asking you to reciprocate," she said quickly, "and I'm not letting personal feelings affect our professional relationship, but I needed you to know, because Richard knows. He's planning to use it against me in court, claiming that I'm having an inappropriate relationship with an employee." Lucas was quiet for a moment, processing this information and its implications. "Are we having an inappropriate relationship?" "I don't know," Emma admitted. "Are feelings inappropriate? Because I can't seem to control mine where you and Sophia are concerned." Through the glass wall of the conference room, they could see Sophia bent over her homework, wearing the horse pendant Emma had given her, and completely absorbed in whatever assignment she was completing. She looked secure, happy, surrounded by the stability their unusual partnership had provided. "Richard is demanding that I choose," Emma continued. "Either terminate your employment and end our personal relationship, or face a prolonged legal battle that could damage both my business and your reputation. What are you going to choose?" Emma smiled, the first genuine smile Lucas had seen from her in weeks. "I'm going to fight. For my company, for my right to make my own decisions, and for the people I care about." That evening, Sophia created a drawing that would later become a turning point in all their lives. She'd been unusually quiet during dinner, processing the tension she could sense but not fully understand. After finishing her homework, she'd settled at the kitchen table with her art supplies and worked with unusual concentration. The drawing showed 3 figures holding hands in front of a house: herself, Lucas, and Emma. But this time, The house was larger, more detailed, with windows that had curtains and a yard that contained a swing set. At the bottom, in her careful third-grade handwriting, Sophia had written, "My family that chose each other." "Papa," she said, presenting the drawing with the solemnity of someone delivering an important document. "I made this for you and Emma." Lucas studied the picture, noting the careful attention Sophia had paid to details: Emma's yellow hair, his prosthetic leg drawn matter-of-factly as part of who he was, all three of them smiling. But it was the title that hit him most powerfully, "My family that chose each other." "This is beautiful, Miha," he said, "but why did you draw Emma as part of our family?" "Because she is," Sophia replied with 8-year-old logic. "She takes care of us, and we take care of her. That's what families do." The next morning, Lucas arrived at work to find Emma already in her office, reviewing legal documents with her attorney, Margaret Chen, a sharp, experienced family law specialist who'd been handling the divorce proceedings. "Lucas, perfect timing," Margaret said as he knocked on the door. "I wanted to discuss the deposition schedule with both of you." The reality of the legal battle was becoming more concrete. Richard's attorneys had subpoenaed financial records, employment contracts, and personal communications. They were building a case that Emma's relationship with Lucas represented poor judgment and emotional instability that could affect her ability to make sound business decisions. "They're going to ask about the nature of your relationship," Margaret explained, "both professional and personal. They'll want details about how you met, why Emma hired you, whether there's been any romantic involvement." "What should we tell them?" Emma asked. "The truth," Margaret replied firmly. "Always the truth. But we need to be prepared for how they'll try to twist that truth to support their narrative." Lucas had been through depositions before, during workers' compensation proceedings after previous injuries. He understood the process, lawyers asking the same questions multiple ways, looking for inconsistencies, trying to create doubt where none should exist. "There's something else," Margaret continued. "Richard's team has hired a private investigator who's been very thorough in researching Lucas's background. They've found some things they plan to use." Lucas felt his stomach tighten. "What kind of things?" "What kind of things?" "Nothing illegal or unethical," Margaret assured him quickly. "But they've documented your financial struggles before Emma hired you, the eviction notice, Sophia's school records showing stress-related behavior changes. They're going to paint a picture of a desperate man who might manipulate a grateful woman for financial gain." The accusation stung because it contained just enough truth to be believable. Lucas had been desperate when Emma offered him the job. He had needed the money, the stability, the chance to provide for Sophia, but the suggestion that he'd manipulated Emma's gratitude felt like a fundamental misunderstanding of who he was and what their relationship had become. "Let them try," Emma said firmly. "Anyone who's spent 5 minutes with Lucas knows that manipulation isn't in his character." "The problem is that juries don't know Lucas," Margaret replied. "They only know what the lawyers tell them. Richard's team is very good at creating compelling narratives." After Margaret left, Emma and Lucas sat in silence for several minutes, processing the magnitude of what they were facing. "I keep thinking about Sophia's drawing," Emma said finally. "About families that choose each other. She's a wise kid." "She is. And she's right, we have become a family, haven't we? Not in the traditional sense, but in the ways that matter." Lucas nodded, thinking about the past few months and how naturally they'd fallen into rhythms of mutual care and support. Emma attending Sophia's school programs, Sophia saving her best drawings to show Emma, the three of them sharing weekend dinners and casual conversations about everything from homework to business strategy. "Emma," Lucas said carefully, "if this legal battle is going to damage your business or complicate your divorce, maybe we should consider—" "Stop," Emma interrupted. "Don't even finish that sentence. Richard doesn't get to dictate my relationships or my business decisions. If we back down now, we're admitting that his intimidation tactics work. But if fighting costs you more than winning is worth, Lucas, Emma said quietly, some things are worth fighting for regardless of the cost. My independence is one of them. Our partnership is another. And whatever this relationship is becoming between us, that's worth fighting for too. The intensity in her voice reminded Lucas of the night he'd pulled her from the burning car, the same determination to survive against overwhelming odds. That afternoon, as Lucas drove Emma to a client meeting, she made a decision that would force everything into the open. I want you to know, she said as they sat in traffic, that win or lose, I don't regret hiring you. I don't regret helping you and Sophia, and I don't regret whatever feelings have developed between us, even if it costs you the divorce settlement. Even then, Emma said firmly, money can be earned back, self-respect can't be bought. Lucas pulled into the client's parking lot and turned to face Emma. For what it's worth, I feel the same way. About the job, about you, about what we've built together, even if it means more legal complications, more stress for Sophia. Sophia drew us as a family, Lucas replied. She sees something we've been too careful to acknowledge. Maybe it's time we stopped being careful. Emma reached over and took his hand, the first deliberately intimate gesture they'd shared since their partnership began. Maybe it is. As they walked into the client meeting together, Lucas realized that the legal battle ahead wasn't just about Richard's attempt to control Emma's business decisions. It was about their right to define their own relationship, to build the kind of unconventional family that Sophia had drawn with such clear-eyed wisdom. Tonight, he would frame Sophia's drawing and hang it in his office, a daily reminder that some fights were worth having, regardless of the cost. Tomorrow, they would begin preparing for depositions that could determine not just Emma's financial future, but the future of the family they'd accidentally created and consciously chosen to protect. The BMW keys in Lucas's pocket felt heavier now, weighted with responsibility and possibility in equal measure. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together as partners, as friends, and maybe as something more permanent than either of them had dared to hope for. The deposition room in Richard's attorney's office was designed to intimidate mahogany paneling, leather chairs, and windows that looked out over the city's financial district. Lucas sat across from 3 lawyers, a court reporter, and Richard himself, who had insisted on attending despite his attorney's advice that his presence might be counterproductive. Emma's wedding ring sat in the center of the conference table like evidence in a criminal trial, which, Lucas reflected grimly, was essentially what this had become. Richard was prosecuting the case that Emma's judgment had been compromised by her relationship with Lucas, and the ring represented everything he claimed to have lost. Mr. Martinez, Richard's lead attorney, James Morrison, began with the kind of smooth professionalism that concealed sharp edges. Let's start with the night of the accident. You testified that you stopped to help without knowing who was in the vehicle. Is that correct? Yes. No hesitation, no recognition that this might be an expensive car, suggesting the driver might be financially well off. Lucas had been prepared for this line of questioning by Margaret, but hearing it still felt like an accusation of calculated heroism. I saw someone who needed help. I didn't think about anything else. Not even your own safety? You didn't consider that approaching a burning vehicle might be dangerous. Of course it was dangerous, but someone was trapped inside. Morrison made a note on his legal pad, a gesture designed to suggest significance. Tell me about your financial situation at the time of the accident. Lucas recited the facts without emotion. 2 jobs, single father, living paycheck to paycheck, medical bills from the accident, creating severe financial strain. Morrison extracted each detail methodically, building a picture of desperation that could support his narrative. So when Mrs. Caldwell first contacted you, you were facing eviction? Yes. Unemployment? Yes. Overwhelming medical debt? Yes. Richard leaned forward in his chair, his expression a mixture of satisfaction and contempt. Lucas met his gaze steadily, refusing to be ashamed of circumstances that had been beyond his control. And then Mrs. Caldwell offered you employment, Morrison continued, a position for which you had no relevant experience at a salary substantially higher than your previous combined income. Didn't that seem unusual to you? It seemed generous, Lucas replied. But Emma, Mrs. Caldwell explained that she needed someone she could trust completely. She felt that my actions during the accident demonstrated character traits she valued. Character traits, Morrison repeated. Or did you perhaps suggest to Mrs. Caldwell that you deserved compensation for your heroic actions? I never asked for anything from Mrs. Caldwell, but you accepted everything she offered. The job, the car, the financial assistance with your rent and medical bills. Lucas glanced at Margaret, who gave him an almost imperceptible nod of encouragement. I accepted a legitimate job offer from someone who had done thorough research on my background and qualifications. Research, Morrison said, consulting his notes. Are you aware that Mrs. Caldwell hired a private investigator to look into your personal life before offering you employment? This was news to Lucas, and his surprise must have shown on his face. Morrison smiled with the satisfaction of someone who'd landed an unexpected blow. You weren't aware that she'd investigated your financial situation, your custody arrangement with your daughter, your employment history. No, I wasn't aware of that. Doesn't it concern you that your employer was conducting surveillance on you before you even knew she was considering offering you a job? Margaret's objection cut through the room's tension. Asked and answered, and relevance? Morrison waved dismissively. I'll rephrase. Mr. Martinez, does it change your perception of Mrs. Caldwell's motivations to learn that she researched your personal life extensively before making her job offer? Lucas considered the question carefully. Did it change anything to know that Emma had done background research? It suggested thoroughness, preparation, perhaps even more genuine interest in his welfare than he'd realized. It suggests she took the hiring decision seriously, he said finally, or that she was looking for someone in a vulnerable position who would be grateful enough to be easily controlled. The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Lucas felt his temper rising but kept his voice level. Mrs. Caldwell has never attempted to control me. She's treated me as a professional partner. A professional partner, Morrison repeated. Is that how you describe your current relationship with Mrs. Caldwell? Here it was, the question they'd all been building toward. Lucas was acutely aware of Richard's intense focus, of the court reporter's fingers hovering over her keyboard, of the weight of his answer. Mrs. Caldwell is my employer and my friend, Lucas said carefully. Just your friend? Margaret's preparation had been thorough. They'd discussed this moment, the importance of honesty balanced against the legal implications of each word. Mrs. Caldwell and I have developed feelings for each other that go beyond friendship, Lucas said. But we've maintained appropriate professional boundaries. Appropriate professional boundaries, Morrison repeated, making another note. Even though you're living in an apartment she pays for, driving a car she provided, and earning a salary that you've testified exceeds your qualifications. I'm living in an apartment I pay rent for, with salary I earn through legitimate work, Lucas corrected. The car is a company vehicle necessary for my job responsibilities. Richard finally spoke, his voice tight with controlled anger. Do you really expect us to believe that my wife's sudden interest in playing savior to a disabled warehouse worker is purely professional? The word disabled landed like a slap. Margaret's sharp intake of breath was audible, and Morrison looked annoyed that his client had broken the careful professional tone they'd maintained. Richard, Morrison warned quietly. But Richard wasn't finished. This man has manipulated my wife's guilt about the accident to extract money, employment, and God knows what else. He's taken advantage of a traumatic situation to insinuate himself into her life and her business. Lucas stood up slowly, his prosthetic leg making the movement deliberate rather than sudden. The room fell silent as he faced Richard directly. Sir, Lucas said quietly, I pulled your wife out of a burning car at the cost of my leg. I've worked honestly and professionally for her company. I've never asked for anything I haven't earned. If you can't see the difference between manipulation and mutual respect, that says more about you than it does about me." The silence that followed was electric. Richard's face was flushed with anger. Morrison looked like he wanted to end the deposition immediately, and Margaret was trying to hide a smile behind her legal pad. Morrison cleared his throat. "Let's take a 15-minute break." As the room emptied, Lucas remained standing by the window, looking out at the city where he'd built a new life from the wreckage of the old one. The wedding ring still sat on the conference table, catching the afternoon light. Soon, Emma would be sitting in this same chair, facing the same accusations, defending the same relationship. Margaret approached him as the court reporter packed up her equipment. "That was well done," she said quietly. "Richard's outburst probably did more damage to his case than anything we could have planned." "Is Emma ready for this?" Lucas asked. "She's stronger than you think," Margaret replied, "and she has something Richard doesn't, the truth on her side." Through the glass wall of the conference room, Lucas could see Richard in heated conversation with his attorney, gesturing angrily, while Morrison appeared to be trying to calm him down. Whatever happened in Emma's deposition, whatever the final outcome of this legal battle, Lucas knew they'd already won the only fight that mattered: the right to define their relationship on their own terms, without interference from people who couldn't understand that love sometimes grows from the most unexpected circumstances. The wedding ring glinted in the afternoon sun, a symbol of a marriage that had ended long before the accident, long before Lucas had entered their lives. What would replace it wasn't yet clear, but whatever the future held, it would be built on choice rather than obligation, on mutual respect rather than control, on the kind of courage that saves lives and transforms them in equal measure. Emma sat in the same intimidating conference room where Lucas had been questioned 3 days earlier, but her posture conveyed none of the vulnerability Richard's attorneys hoped to exploit. She wore a navy business suit that struck the perfect balance between professional authority and feminine strength, and she met each question with the calm confidence of someone who'd built a successful company from nothing. The family photo Lucas had never seen before sat prominently on the table now. Emma, Richard, and Richard's teenage son from his first marriage, taken during what looked like a Caribbean vacation. Richard's strategy had shifted since Lucas's deposition. Now he was emphasizing the family Emma was supposedly abandoning for her inappropriate relationship with her employee. "Mrs. Caldwell," Morrison began, his tone more respectful than it had been with Lucas, but equally calculated. "You've been married to my client for 8 years. Would you describe it as a happy marriage?" "I would describe it as a marriage that worked for both of us for several years," Emma replied carefully. "Recently, that's changed." "Changed? How?" "We've grown in different directions. We want different things from life." "Such as?" Emma glanced at Margaret, who nodded encouragingly. They'd prepared for this line of questioning, knowing that Morrison would try to paint her as an unfaithful wife, abandoning her family responsibilities. "Richard wants a wife who supports his career and social ambitions without pursuing her own," Emma said. "I want a partnership where both people's goals and dreams matter equally. And you believe Mr. Martinez offers you that kind of partnership?" "I believe Lucas treats me as an equal. He respects my professional judgment, supports my business decisions, and values my independence." Morrison made a note, then looked up with the expression of someone about to spring a trap. "Mrs. Caldwell, are you in love with Mr. Martinez?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Emma had known it was coming, had rehearsed various responses with Margaret, but actually facing it felt different than preparation. "Yes," she said simply, "I am." Richard's sharp intake of breath was audible across the room. Morrison looked surprised by her directness. He'd clearly expected denial or evasion. "And when did these feelings develop?" "Gradually, over the months we've been working together. Lucas is a man of extraordinary character, integrity, and compassion. Spending time with him and his daughter has reminded me what healthy relationships look like." "You're including his daughter in your romantic feelings?" I'm including Sophia in my vision of a family built on mutual care and respect rather than obligation and control. Morrison consulted his notes, clearly adjusting his strategy in response to Emma's unexpected forthrightness. Mrs. Caldwell, are you aware that Mr. Martinez was facing eviction when you first contacted him? Yes. That he'd lost his jobs due to his accident? Yes. That he had substantial medical debt? Yes. All of which made his heroic actions that night even more remarkable. He risked everything to save a stranger, knowing he couldn't afford the consequences. Or, Morrison suggested, it made him a perfect target for manipulation, a desperate man who would be grateful for any assistance. Emma's composure finally cracked slightly, her voice sharpening. Mr. Morrison, I didn't seek out Lucas Martinez. He saved my life. Period. Everything that's happened since then has grown from genuine respect and affection, not manipulation. But you did hire a private investigator to research his background before offering him employment. Emma paused, recognizing this as the trap that had surprised Lucas. Yes, I did. Why? Because I was considering offering a significant position to someone I'd met under traumatic circumstances. I needed to verify that my instincts about his character were correct. And what did that investigation reveal? That Lucas Martinez was exactly who I thought he was, a devoted father, a hard worker, a man who'd never broken his word or failed to meet his responsibilities. The investigation confirmed that he was someone I could trust completely. Morrison pressed forward. Didn't it also reveal someone who might be motivated by financial desperation to take advantage of your gratitude? No, Emma said firmly. It revealed someone who'd consistently chosen integrity over easy money, who'd worked multiple jobs rather than accept charity, who'd sacrificed his own comfort to provide for his daughter. If anything, the investigation made me more confident in my decision to hire him. Richard finally spoke, his voice thick with emotion. Emma, what about our family? What about the life we built together? Emma turned to face her husband directly, her expression softening slightly. Richard, we built a life that worked for you. I adapted myself to fit your vision of what a wife should be. I'm not willing to do that anymore. So you're abandoning 8 years of marriage for a man you've known less than a year. I'm choosing authenticity over convenience, Emma replied. I'm choosing someone who sees me as a complete person rather than an accessory to his life. Morrison interjected before Richard could respond. Mrs. Caldwell, do you believe your feelings for Mr. Martinez have affected your business judgment? Absolutely not. Company revenues are up 30% since Lucas joined the team. Client satisfaction scores are at an all-time high. My business judgment has never been better. But you've given him a company car, a salary that exceeds his qualifications, and decision-making authority that's unusual for someone in his position. I've given him the tools and authority necessary to do his job effectively. Lucas has more than earned every benefit he's received. Margaret looked at her watch and made a subtle gesture. They'd been at this for nearly 3 hours, and Emma's energy was beginning to flag despite her determined composure. Mrs. Caldwell, Morrison continued, if you had to choose between your relationship with Mr. Martinez and a favorable divorce settlement, which would you choose? The question was designed to suggest that Emma's feelings were costing her financially, that she was making irrational decisions based on emotion rather than logic. That's a false choice, Emma replied. I shouldn't have to choose between personal happiness and financial security. The fact that Richard is trying to force that choice demonstrates exactly why our marriage is ending. But if the choice were presented to you? Emma looked directly at Richard, her voice gentle but final. I would choose the relationship built on respect and equality over the one built on control and financial dependency. The silence that followed was profound. Richard's face had gone pale, and he was staring at the family photo as if seeing it for the first time. Morrison cleared his throat. I think we have what we need for now. As the deposition ended and people began gathering their papers, Richard approached Emma with the hesitant manner of someone who'd finally understood something important. He said quietly, using the nickname he'd called her early in their marriage. Did you ever love me? Really love me? Emma paused in packing her briefcase, considering the question with the seriousness it deserved. I loved the man I thought you could become, she said finally. But that man never existed, did he? You've always been exactly who you are now, someone who needs to control, rather than partner with the people in his life. And Martinez doesn't need to control you. Lucas encourages me to be more myself, not less. There's a difference. Richard nodded slowly, the fight seeming to drain out of him. I suppose there is. That evening, Emma found Lucas and Sophia in their apartment, working together on a school project about family traditions. Sophia was explaining how they'd started having pancakes every Sunday morning, how Lucas always read her a story before bed, how Emma had become part of their weekly routine of museum visits and library trips. How did it go? Lucas asked when Sophia went to brush her teeth. Better than expected, Emma replied, settling beside him on the couch. I think Richard finally understood that this isn't about winning or losing. It's about choosing the life I actually want to live. Lucas took her hand, noting how natural the gesture felt after months of careful professional boundaries. And what life is that? Emma smiled, glancing toward the bathroom, where Sophia was singing loudly while brushing her teeth. One where Sunday morning pancakes and bedtime stories matter more than business dinners and social obligations. One where a family photo shows people who chose each other instead of people who settled for each other. Through the thin walls, they could hear Sophia finishing her bedtime routine, getting ready for another night in the stable, loving home that had grown from tragedy and been strengthened by choice. Tomorrow would bring more legal complexities, more negotiations about property and custody and financial arrangements. But tonight, the family that Sophia had drawn with such clear-eyed wisdom was real, present, and permanent in all the ways that mattered. The wedding ring Richard had displayed so prominently during the depositions was already in a jewelry box somewhere, becoming just another artifact of a relationship that had ended long before anyone acknowledged its conclusion. What would replace it, if anything, would be chosen freely, offered willingly, and accepted as a symbol of partnership rather than possession. 1 year later, Lucas stood in the kitchen of their new house, making Sunday morning pancakes, while Sophia set the table with the careful precision of someone who took family traditions seriously. The house wasn't large or ostentatious, a modest 3-bedroom in a neighborhood with good schools and tree-lined streets, but it was theirs, in a way their apartment had never been. Emma emerged from the bedroom wearing one of Lucas's old t-shirts and pajama pants, her hair tousled from sleep and her hand resting protectively over the gentle curve of her pregnancy. At 6 months, she was just beginning to show, and Sophia had appointed herself chief protector of both Emma and the baby she'd already started calling my little brother or sister. Smells wonderful, Emma said, kissing Lucas's cheek as she reached around him for a coffee mug. Decaf, she added with a grimace. One of the many sacrifices of pregnancy. Worth it, though, Lucas replied, flipping a pancake with the ease of someone who'd perfected the Sunday morning routine. The new house keys hung on a hook by the back door, gleaming silver symbols of the stability they'd built together. The keys represented more than home ownership. They represented the successful navigation of legal challenges, family integration, and the kind of deliberate partnership that had emerged from the wreckage of that rainy night on Highway 9. The divorce settlement had been more favorable than anyone had expected. Richard's legal team had ultimately advised him that pursuing the incompetency angle was likely to backfire, especially after Emma's composed performance during her deposition. The final agreement had given Emma complete control of her business, primary custody of the house they'd shared, and enough financial independence to pursue whatever future she chose. Richard had remarried 6 months ago, a woman 20 years younger who seemed perfectly content to serve as an accessory to his social and professional ambitions. He'd sent a polite congratulations card when Emma and Lucas announced their engagement, a gesture that felt like genuine closure rather than sarcasm. Lucas's transition from security consultant to business partner had been gradual but official. Caldwell Security Solutions was now a subsidiary of the main company, with Lucas holding a 40% ownership stake and full responsibility for a division that had grown beyond their original expectations. Emma's faith in his business acumen had proven justified. Their client base had expanded significantly, and several major healthcare systems had signed long-term security consulting contracts. "Papa, can I tell the baby about horses while we eat?" Sophia asked, arranging napkins with the kind of attention to detail she'd inherited from Emma. "I think the baby would love to hear about horses," Lucas replied, watching Sophia's face light up with excitement. Sophia's adaptation to their blended family had been seamless in the way that children often manage when adults provide security and consistency. She'd started calling Emma Mama M without prompting, had claimed the baby as her special responsibility, and had decorated the nursery with dozens of drawings depicting various family configurations, all of which included horses somewhere in the composition. The family photo that now sat prominently on their mantelpiece showed the three of them at Sophia's school science fair, where she'd won first place for a project about butterfly metamorphosis. Emma was holding Sophia's blue ribbon while Lucas stood behind them, his prosthetic leg barely visible beneath his slacks, one hand on Emma's shoulder and the other ruffling Sophia's hair. They looked like what they were, a family that had chosen each other deliberately and built something stronger than circumstance. "I got a letter from David yesterday," Lucas mentioned as they sat down to breakfast. David, his prosthetist, had become something of a mentor and friend over the past year. "He wants me to speak at a conference about adaptive employment, something about how the right job fit can transform both disability and ability." "That's wonderful," Emma said, squeezing his hand. "You should do it. Your story could help a lot of people." Lucas's relationship with his prosthetic had evolved from necessity to acceptance to something approaching partnership. He still had difficult days when phantom pain made concentration challenging, but he'd learned to accommodate those limitations rather than fight them. More importantly, he'd stopped defining himself by what he'd lost and started focusing on what he'd gained, not just in terms of career and family, but in perspective and resilience. "Mrs. Peterson wants me to write an essay about heroes for the school newspaper," Sophia announced between bites of pancake. "I'm going to write about how Papa saved Emma and then Emma saved us back." "That's not exactly how it happened," Lucas protested mildly. "It's exactly how it happened," Emma disagreed. "You saved my life, and I had the privilege of helping save yours." After breakfast, they settled in the living room for their weekly tradition of reading together. Sophia had graduated from picture books to chapter books, and they were currently working their way through the complete works of E.B. White. Today's selection was Charlotte's Web, which had remained Sophia's favorite despite having read it dozens of times. As Lucas read aloud about Charlotte's determination to save Wilbur, Emma curled against his side while Sophia stretched out on the floor, one hand resting on Emma's belly in hopes of feeling the baby move. The afternoon sunlight streamed through windows that looked out on a backyard where they'd already started planning a garden and discussing the possibility of getting Sophia the horse she'd been requesting with increasing frequency. "Read the part about the miracle again," Sophia requested when they reached the end of the chapter. Lucas flipped back a few pages and found the passage Sophia meant. "But it's true, and I have to say what is true. Thank you for coming to my aid." "That's us," Sophia said with satisfaction. "We all came to each other's aid." Emma shifted position slightly, wincing as the baby kicked with particular enthusiasm. "I think someone agrees with you," she said, taking Sophia's hand and placing it where the movement was strongest. "Baby agrees that we're a miracle family," Sophia announced solemnly. That evening, after Sophia was in bed and they were sitting together on the couch reviewing plans for the nursery, Emma brought up a conversation they'd been having intermittently for months. "I've been thinking about what Sophia said at breakfast," she began, "about heroes and saving each other. What about it?" I don't think either of us was trying to be heroic that night. You saw someone who needed help, and you helped. I saw someone whose help had cost him everything, and I tried to balance the scales. And now," Emma smiled, resting her head against his shoulder. "Now, I think we were both just trying to do the right thing, and somehow we ended up doing the perfect thing." Lucas kissed the top of her head, breathing in the familiar scent of her shampoo and the promise of their shared future. "Sophia's essay is going to be interesting." "Sophia's essay is going to be true," Emma corrected. "Sometimes the most extraordinary stories grow from the most ordinary choices, choosing to help, choosing to be grateful, choosing to build something better from whatever circumstances life delivers." The new house settled around them with the comfortable sounds of a home that was being lived in rather than simply occupied. Upstairs, Sophia was probably reading under her covers with a flashlight, a habit Lucas had decided not to discourage as long as her grades remained strong. In a few months, the nursery would contain a crib, a changing table, and all the equipment necessary for welcoming the newest member of their unconventional family. Lucas looked around the living room at the family photos covering the mantelpiece, at Sophia's artwork decorating the walls, at the baby furniture boxes stacked in the corner, waiting to be assembled. A year ago, he'd been a desperate single father, facing eviction and unemployment. Now he was a business owner, a husband, a father preparing to welcome a second child into a home built on choice rather than obligation. The keys hanging by the back door caught the lamplight as evening settled around them. They were more than symbols of home ownership. They were proof that sometimes the worst moments of our lives contain the seeds of the best, that courage can be rewarded in ways we never imagine, and that families formed by choice can be stronger than those formed by chance. Outside, it started to rain gently, the kind of soft precipitation that nourishes gardens rather than flooding highways. Lucas listened to the water against their windows and felt nothing but gratitude for the storm that had brought them together and the calm that had allowed them to build something lasting from the wreckage. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, business decisions, parenting responsibilities, the everyday complexities of blending two lives into one shared journey. But tonight, surrounded by the family that Sophia had drawn with such prescient wisdom, Lucas Martinez was exactly where he belonged, doing exactly what he was meant to do, protecting and providing for the people he loved, in the home they'd chosen together.